Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly exploration of the ideas, people, and projects building the new digital economy and the future of money. My name is Adam B. Levine, and today we're going to focus on some of the most influential doers in the Bitcoin space today. Shakil Khan is an investor and serial entrepreneur most often associated with Spotify. He's the creator of CoinDesk, one of the top sources of original reporting in the Bitcoin space, and he sat down with Mark Hochstein, editor of American Banker, for a fireside chat at the end of last month's Inside Bitcoins conference. This is a really fantastic talk if you want to know what the smart money is thinking about Bitcoin, and it occupies the last 36 minutes of today's show. But backing up for a moment, Stephanie starts things off with a lightning interview by LTB standards with Charlie Shrem. Alan Safahi is next, with a 19-minute interview conducted by Stephanie discussing the cash transfer business, freedom, regulation, and more. If you appreciate the work we're doing, stop by the brand new letstalkbitcoin.com, send us a tip, and check out our new daily guest blog. So far this week, we've had John Light introduce us to the trust framework that'll guide our personal cloud future. Marcel O looks into an alternative reality where the internet was created in 2009 rather than cryptocurrencies, and what kind of response it would invoke. Mark Matthews makes the argument that crypto keys are free speech and should be protected as such. I'm thrilled we're able to keep the conversation going with new ideas and analysis from a wide variety of perspectives, all for free at the new letstalkbitcoin.com. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's join Stephanie now on the floor of Inside Bitcoins as she talks with Charlie Shrem, CEO of BitInstant.
All right, I'm here talking with Charlie Shrem. Hi, Charlie. Just heard your keynote speech here at the Inside Bitcoins conference.
Good?
It was great. Yeah.
Thank
you. I learned some new things about you because I sort of know you. We have some mutual friends and everything in the Bitcoin community, and as well as going to events like the Porcupine Freedom Festival, right?
That was a lot of fun.
But I learned today that you're 23 years old, right?
Yep.
And there's another number that people associate with you. It's Four-Finger Charlie, right?
Yeah, Four-Finger Charlie.
Can you tell me about why you are called that?
I used to wear a ring that had my Bitcoin private.
Where did it go?
I take it off because everyone knows about it. I don't want to get my finger chopped off. I have a ring on that has my Bitcoin private key on it, and I don't wear it anymore. I haven't worn it in a while because I'm scared.
That's probably a smart move, I see. So you told a really interesting story about how BitInstant got started. And of course, you're the founder and CEO of BitInstant, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What is BitInstant in just one sentence for somebody who doesn't know?
The fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to buy and sell Bitcoin. We make it really easy to buy a Bitcoin with partnerships and 7-Eleven, CVS, Duane Reade, places like that. You can walk in and buy Bitcoin there.
So you can buy Bitcoin with cash instantly. By the time you get home, make a cash deposit, it's there.
Yep.
And right now you're doing a little bit of a revamp, as you
really
explained.
Excited about that, yeah.
Yeah, can you tell me what's coming next for BitInstant?
We're changing a lot of, you'll see a kind of a whole new website. We're changing the way our system works and the way we interact with our customers, and we're lowering fees and changing kind of the whole fee structure around and getting our regulatory stuff in check. And we decided to, like I said in the thing.
What does that mean, changing the fee structure around?
You'll see.
We'll see.
It's cheaper to buy Bitcoin.
So what about new features? Are you going to have some new features?
Yeah, we have some new locations. We have bank transfers now. You can buy Bitcoin instantly with the bank account, and a few other stuff. We have the ability to withdraw money back to your bank account instantly. So if you have a debit card, we can actually fund your debit card. That's really exciting.
I know a couple of years ago, BitInstant had this idea they were working on with a Bitcoin debit card. Yeah, is that still in the works, or what's?
So we finally got approval for the European version of the card, but the US version is like really, really difficult to do for regulatory reasons and stuff. So I don't want to launch the card just in Europe. I want to have it global, so we're just waiting.
Tell me real quick the story of how BitInstant came into being. You said you were out of college and you wanted to...
I was still in college.
You were still in college?
Yeah. I was just browsing the internet forums one day, and I saw someone post an interesting idea for a Bitcoin company who is our CTO, Gareth Nelson.
How did you find out about Bitcoin, first of all, actually?
I just read about it somewhere online. I don't remember. Read about it, and I heard about it. And then he had his idea, and I couldn't really raise any money, so my mom had to give me some venture capital.
Your mom was actually sitting behind me at the top. Very proud. Both of your parents were here. But you tried to get, I guess, venture capital through kind of traditional channels at first, back in, what was that, 2011?
2011, yeah.
Yeah, and
3 years ago.
And you got, laughed out of some offices.
Everyone laughed at me. They're still laughing. I laughed them all the way to the bank.
Yeah, that's right. Once you're done with this big upgrade, I mean, where do you see BitInstant going in 5 years?
Global.
Are you global?
Global. Big time global.
Are you thinking about other cryptocurrencies besides Bitcoin?
BitInstant is extremely agnostic. We can support any cryptocurrency. We're looking at Ripple. I really like the idea of Ripple and how it works. I love the people behind it. So we'll see where that takes us.
What is your favorite thing about Bitcoin right now?
Just the community.
Community?
You and everyone and all my friends and family. These guys are my family. They're the only ones who understand what I'm doing every day. So it's like my parents, like, they understand, but they don't understand. And so it's just being a part of this whole community is like the best thing of it.
All right, Charlie Shrem, thank you so much. And you can find you online at bitinstant.com, right?
Yep.
Thanks so much for talking with me today.
More than 300,000 users and counting trust blockchain.info. It's a Bitcoin wallet service and a wealth of Bitcoin information, and is completely free to use. With a blockchain.info wallet, you'll get the convenience of a web wallet and the security of a desktop client. Blockchain.info is also a block explorer. You can use it to see Bitcoin transactions in real time, check the balance of any Bitcoin address, and view many handy Bitcoin charts, all for free. See what they have to offer today at blockchain.info.
You're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly show include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
I am here talking with Alan Safahi. He is the CEO and founder of ZipZap, right?
Correct. I also sit on the advisory board for OpenCoin, which is a creator of Ripple.
We were just on a Bitcoin and freedom of speech panel together, and I found out that you came to the U.S. from Iran in the 1970s to get more freedom, basically, right?
Yeah, I came here to actually get educated, but found out after I got here that the country had changed while I was out. So I wound up staying and, been here 34 years now.
And you've clearly been really successful starting some businesses and got involved with the Bitcoin community. Tell me, what is ZipZap for somebody who's never heard of it?
ZipZap is a global cash payment network. It basically enables customers to shop online and pay cash offline in their own local currency, local retailers, grocery stores, convenience stores, post office, and so forth.
And when you say global, is it truly global?
Well, we are in U.S., Brazil, Russia, all the Caribbean countries. We are expanding about 700,000 locations. We are expanding to over 2 million locations by next year, by third quarter of next year. So
Wow.
we're going to be in about 50 plus countries.
What makes ZipZap different from, for instance, like PayPal or something like that?
Well, first of all, PayPal targets people that have bank accounts and credit cards. So if you take the world population as a pyramid, they target the top of the pyramid. In the countries,
Sure.
Western countries, the countries that have very established banking systems and so forth. But when you peel the onion and behind that, you see that even in those countries, there are more people that are cash-based, that are credit card-based or bank. 85% of all online transactions in Russia, for example, is paid with cash offline. And in Brazil, almost the same numbers. People are used to paying with cash in their own local countries. What we do is we enable them to do the same thing on a global scale.
I see, yeah. So that's clearly something that's not really available, especially in the U.S., anywhere else. So.
Yeah, we are the first company. We call ourselves the API for cash. We work with developers and web developers, app developers, and fintech companies to let them integrate with our APIs to offer a cash option to their customers. It could be a merchant selling widgets online, or it could be a software company creating an invoicing module, for example, that now you don't have to just put credit card as a method of payment or PayPal. You could also add cash as a method of payment.
And how would somebody do that, like logistically? Like if I wanted to buy something from some merchant, I would have to go take cash somewhere and put it...
There are several processes. Let's say if you're buying a Bitcoin online, you go to an exchange like BitInstant, you choose to pay with cash. Then based on your location, we'll give you 3 options nearby that you can go to make that payment. And once you choose that option, then we generate a payment slip, which looks like a bill. And you take that with you and make a payment with cash. We follow the bill payment modules that these companies have built, these retailers. So the clerks are very used to that model. But you look at countries like Russia, for example, they have kiosks. So the model is a little bit different in Russia. You still start online, going to an exchange. Once you decide to pay, we send you to a kiosk location nearby, and you just walk up and put in the account number we give you and put in the cash. In Brazil, we use the Boleta system, which has been around for decades. That's a form that, it's sort of like our payment slip, but you can take it to any bank and deposit it and make cash payment, and the person who makes the payment will receive notification immediately that the payment has been made, and they get their coins oftentimes before they leave the store. So there are really good payment options around the world, and we just kind of put a layer on top of all of these good payment options and provide a really good, unique customer experience.
Yeah, and it wouldn't just be for buying Bitcoins, right? It could be for buying anything.
Yeah, anything. Yeah, you can pay your rent, you can buy music, you can buy minutes, for your long distance, anything. Yeah.
So I am guessing, and you can tell me if I'm correct, that this is probably the hardest to accomplish from a regulatory standpoint in the U.S. Is that right?
Yeah, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. That's true.
Wow.
It's more difficult to do payments in the U.S. than it is in Europe or even in African countries these days.
Wow.
So
that's pretty. I think that's worth noting.
You know what's difficult is there's no uniformity across the states. Each state has their own rules, so you have to go state by state and if you're an exchange and you're selling Bitcoins, you have to make sure that you're licensed in each state, which it takes a long time. It takes 2-3 years.
One's bad enough.
Costs a lot of money, exactly, and you get audited every year by each state potentially. So when you're in Europe, for example, you just need one license from financial authorities, FCA, and that's good across all of Europe. A lot of people think that we are already 5 to 10 years behind in innovation in the U.S. because we have all of these regulations that stifle innovation.
Oh yeah, and I imagine not just that, but like the cost of compliance with all those regulations has to be passed on to the consumer.
The cost is obviously passed on. Every time you get audited by the states, they send you the bill for that audit. So, what's really more costly is the time that the entrepreneurs have to spend looking for licensing and staying compliant.
Yeah.
I think I'm all advocating that there should be regulations, and they should be in a way that is non-intrusive, it's not overreaching. But right now, these regulations are taking so much time for entrepreneurs, the people that have, that want to start up companies in Bitcoin business. They're spending a lot of their time dealing with regulations versus innovating, and that's what the danger is. The other danger is investors may shy away from investing in companies because they're not sure about the regulatory environment.
I remember just earlier today, we saw a panel here at the Bitcoin conference about investing in Bitcoin companies from a bunch of investors, and they were saying that they wanted to, one of the things like that was a red flag for them that they would avoid was a startup that would have regulatory liability, or like it might be sort of complicated to get around the regulations that are sort of hanging over their head. And I just thought that was, wow, I mean, it's incredibly unfair, I guess, to the person who's starting a company and they don't know what it's going to be like because it's the Bitcoin world, and now they don't get investors because these regulators are sort of threatening to put some law on them.
That's precisely why I joined a bunch of other companies in emerging payments to help found a self-regulation organization we call Digital Asset Transfer Authority, or DATA, and this was just announced last night. And we're forming a committee to create the organization to help companies in emerging payments and virtual currencies to self-regulate in order to avoid government stepping in and telling us what to do. It's been a model that's been used in other industries.
Right. I was sort of thinking, is this sort of like the movie ratings?
Like the motion picture industries, yeah, exactly. They've been very successful at that, to self-regulate music industry and others. We need to kind of create guidelines for these startup companies and help them understand what the regulatory environment looks like, what the compliance issues are, and let them, be prepared for that.
Sometimes in those industries where they're attempting to self-regulate, the self-imposed guidelines, because they're afraid of what the regulators might do, often end up being pretty strict, or pretty harsh, maybe even harsher than an actual regulation would be. And I know that sometimes...
I doubt that. I doubt any of us would ever create anything that would be harsher than what the government has already created for financial services.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree to some extent that the financial services industry is it's not the best industry for consumers' perspective. If you think about it, we are probably the worst industry, even worse than airlines, and I consider myself among them. We take people's money and then we tell them where they can spend it or how they can spend it or with whom they can spend it and how much, and when they don't do that, then we penalize them, right?
Yeah.
So, and we charge them fees when they do.
Right.
So it's not a really consumer-friendly organization. We are very cognizant of that. The group that I joined are all, very progressive-minded people in the payment space. A lot of Bitcoin exchanges, a lot of, Ripple, OpenCoin, other people that are at the forefront of this technology. And I doubt that we are going to be succumbing to those kind of fears that you talked about. That we're not doing this out of fear. We're doing this out of, we think, a necessity to educate people, educate the government. A lot of times these people in government are in their own little bubble, and they don't really understand why is there a need for Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to help educate them, but the way to do that is not to violate the laws. The way to do it is to self-regulate and work with the government to ease up on the regulation down the road.
Some of these industries that say, well, we're going to self-regulate, they're basically just predicting, or the government has said, do this voluntarily or we'll make it a law. So that hasn't happened in your case.
No,
though, right?
no.
Because they don't even understand Bitcoin enough to say that,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. No, that's not the reason for this organization. Digital Asset Transfer Authority was born of the idea that there is a need for self-regulation before the government overreacts and creates something that's totally makes it even more difficult than it is today. As I said, we are already losing the innovation war to Europe and other continents because of all the huge obstacles we've created in the U.S. So we're not aiming to add more regulation. We just want to kind of define it better.
Sure, yeah. So, okay, tell me more about your involvement with OpenCoin. How did you get interested in that in the first place?
Well,
why?
I'm excited about OpenCoin. I think it addresses some of the concerns that people have regarding the mining. And, for example, as a payment processor, if it takes 10 minutes to an hour to get approval on a Bitcoin, that doesn't lend itself easily to being a payment processing platform. People want instantaneous gratification, so it needs to be a lot faster. With OpenCoin, because they have a ledger that they authorize against, you can get fractions of seconds. So that's one of the reasons. I like the whole network concept of tying in a bunch of different currencies together and making it easier for people to maybe email money to each other, for example.
Right, yeah. So, okay, that would get around the whole idea of block size and the confirmation time, like with Bitcoin, right? So the idea is that every 10 minutes a block is generated, and the transaction has to be included in a block to be confirmed. And so sometimes you're waiting 10 minutes for that first confirmation to come up. And some other alternative coins have attempted to address that by making smaller blocks, like that come out every 2 minutes or for every minute or something like that.
Litecoin, and there's some markets for that, for the smaller transactions.
But that can create its own problems, right? Because then sometimes, like with TerraCoin, I think it was once every minute, and then you have the problem of like miners that aren't caught up with the rest of the network, and they have orphaned blocks or something like that. So
now you're going into the woods with the technical stuff that I'm not familiar with. But I can tell you that with Ripple, it's a cool concept. It's a concept whose time has come. I think it makes it easier to transfer money around the world, makes it faster to do payment processing. It enables you to go in and out of Bitcoin easily, which is, I think, one of the issues with Bitcoin, the cash in and the cash out problem. So if you have a lot of gateways and a lot of, points of entry for cash and points of exit for cash, that would add value to Bitcoin as a currency.
Yeah, so there's a potential, I guess, that some people who are hearing this are not going to know what Ripple is. So how would you explain Ripple in a few sentences for somebody who's never heard of it?
Well, Ripple is another math-based open system, just like Bitcoin. It enables you to. There's two things. It's a XRP is the currency of Ripple. So there's a currency, and there's also a payment processing platform. And the currency is nice, but I'm really excited about the payment processing aspect of OpenCoin. So it allows you to, for example, transfer your Bitcoins to dollars and then dollars to Bitcoins on the other side. You can think of it as in the early days of email, if you had, you could only send emails to people within your own group. Okay.
Oh yeah, like AOL or something. Yeah.
So you have CompuServe and AOL and others that they could only send email to each other, and now the internet came in and connected all of these together. So with HTTP, you can send email to anybody around the world. So OpenCoin or Ripple is HTTP for currency. So you can you have all these people that have Google Wallet and maybe ISIS Wallet, and they have Bitcoins, and they have a lot of different money in a lot of different pockets in different wallets. And now they can, for the first time, connect them together and move in and out of their wallet and their own currency very easily.
Cool. Yeah, I like that explanation. I had never heard anything like that before, but yeah, it makes sense. Great. So, do you think OpenCoin or Ripple is going to be part of the data consortium?
Yes, they are already. Yeah.
Oh, they already are. Okay.
They're already signed on this.
And so, what kinds of things would a member do, like to self-regulate, I guess? Like, what terms do you already have laid out, I guess, as part of...
Well, we purposefully didn't lay out terms, but we laid out some guidelines that we all agreed upon, and it's all on the web. But basically, it's guidelines to...
Where can people find that on the web?
I would look up the hashtag data, DATA, or you can go to datauthority.org.
Okay.
And there's a website already for that. There's also a Facebook page for data, which is Digital Asset Transfer Authority.
Yeah.
There are some VCs that are part of it. There are some consulting groups that are part of it. And we are going to be recruiting lobbyists and other people consultants that can help us educate the regulators.
Oh.
So I think people should get involved. It's still a new concept. We just formed a committee to form the organization. So a lot of the companies, Bitcoin exchanges and others can join as founding members still. I have a saying that I couldn't get a chance to say in the conference, which is, I think Bitcoin is the currency of the people, by the people, and for the people. So we need to look at it as, yes, it's a currency, and it's something that it's going to be around, whether it's in the form it is today or a different form. We need to embrace it and find innovations to build around it and on top of it. So I'm excited to be part of Bitcoin. I'm excited to be part of OpenCoin as well with Ripple, because that helps facilitate even more Bitcoin in circulation.
Great. Alan Safahi, thank you so much. Where can people find ZipZap one more time?
ZipZapInc.com, so ZipZapInc, ZipZapInc.com. But we don't sell directly to consumers, so they usually go through one of our exchange partners to find us.
Okay, thank you so much.
I was thinking they would at least have armchairs, but for the fireside chat. But just imagine that we're in front of a fireplace, smoking a pipe and drinking cognac. Shaq, you came from Spotify, so you were part of the big disruption in the music industry some years ago. What parallels, if any, do you see from that experience in what's going on today with money?
So, the first one would probably be a personal one, that I do know how to pick the industries which are going to give me the biggest headache. There's far easier industries to get involved in. But one way you could look at it, the conversation in the early days of Spotify used to be, we'd go out there and talk to people who go, well, I really need to own my music. I need to feel the CD. That conversation then went on to, well, I need to own my download. Did they actually own a download? It was a file on their computer. That conversation's now stopped, and I'll explain how that comes onto the digital currency side of things. But the DVD space is a similar thing. I'm sure you all remember people buying DVDs and having bespoke cabinets built for their DVD collection. These days, everyone streams off iTunes or from Netflix. So the ownership has gone away. This physical feel and touch of a product or a good of whatever value has actually diminished. Now, if you look at the money side of things, and prime example is there was just a report this week that over 10% of Starbucks transactions are now being done via smartphones. I may be off by 1 or 2%, but around 10% of all transactions, when somebody walks into Starbucks, it's basically pulling their phone out. They're no longer reaching into their pocket or their wallet to take money out. So technology and smartphones have fundamentally shifted what ownership of whether it's content or certain goods were. Now, how I always try and explain Bitcoin and the digital currency space that we're in is, why is it in 2013 I can send you an email, a text message, a voice message, an audio message, any kind of file, it'll take you 2 seconds, but you say to me, hey Shaq, you owe me $10 for that pizza from last week, and I'm like, well, I'll try and send it to you. The amount is $10, my bank's going to charge me $27 transaction fee, and hopefully you may get it next week, and that isn't guaranteed. So if you just look at that divide, and we live in a world where real time is not real time enough, and then you've got this banking system which is slower than it's ever been. So, you know, those similarities start coming into play because the technology is now there, as has been proven by Bitcoin. And, you know, prime example is Apple's App Store, microtransactions there. You know, the friction has been removed, and we just need to do more things to, you know, make it more frictionless.
Do you think that money and banking might be a little bit different in the sense that banking and financial services are protected industries? You know, you and I can't just start a bank, wake up one morning, start a bank in our garage. You know, there's licensing, there's charters, there's lots of regulation. Could that be something that slows down disruption in a way that you didn't see?
Absolutely, because there's a lot more zeros in the banking system than most other industries. You take the tobacco industry, it's an $800 billion a year industry. You take the global financial industry, I have no idea how many trillions that is. It's not as easy as setting up an Instagram going, hey, I'm going to set up a website in my garage. So naturally there's going to be more barriers, and naturally there are more people at stake, and there are more people, you know, who are grandfathered in, who've had a certain way of doing things, and they're frightened, right? So there's always a fear, and I don't mean that they're petrified of, you know, somebody's going to come over and take over the banking system, but they're frightened of change. And I think, you know, the ones who embrace it, they tend to be the ones who in the early days are regarded as, well, this is going to be a fad, this is going to be a fad, and they'll end up making great businesses out of it. So who knows where it ends up, but yeah, absolutely, there's fear there, and you combine that with regulation and laws and rules are a great way to instill fear in the people. And a lot of the time there's valid reasons for having these rules and having this fear factor, because you just cannot have every Tom, Dick and Harry kind of creating a mini bank out there without any consumer protection.
As a VC who's been spending a lot of time in the Bitcoin space now, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are looking for capital in terms of, you know, how to approach potential investors based on the pitches that you've heard so far? So
I must have spent, you know, best part of a year, met over 40 companies in the Bitcoin space. The first thing I would say to all of them is, there was a presentation by Maria from DirectPayNet about an hour ago. Everyone should go and read that presentation, reread it, to actually understand what goes on in the business world. What I have seen, and again, this is just my opinion, is a lot of people who I'm seeing who are wanting to build business in the Bitcoin industry have no experience of running a business. And don't get me wrong, I'm a high school dropout. I didn't even finish my high school, so who am I to talk? But over the years, I've run enough business and had enough failures to understand the fundamentals of running, an enterprise, which is profit and loss, cash flow, what a balance sheet looks like. So what I'm seeing is you have a lot of people with great ideas, with zero or minimal execution experience, but also the strategy a lot of the time is hope. And hope is not a strategy. It's great if it's your money, but think about it. I mean, for me, I invest my own money, but if you're a VC out there, chances are your money, the millions of pounds, are from limited partners such as, Yale or Princeton. Yeah? So one side you've got billions of dollars, and they are taking many different bets, and some of them are safe, some of them high risk. On the other side, you've got Johnny from Estonia who's got this great idea for an app, and the divide there is so big, and the two of them aren't necessarily speaking the same language. So what I always try and say is, and I don't want to mistake this with regulation, what I'm trying to say, from what I am seeing, is certain amount of adult supervision is required before it goes to total chaos.
Adult supervision. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I met an entrepreneur about 2 months ago, and I said, "What are you?" He's in the Bitcoin space, and I said, "What are you working on?" He said, "No, I'm working on a wallet for the emerging markets, feature phones, so not smartphones, feature phones for the emerging markets, especially India and Africa." I'm like, "Great idea, I'm sure there's a big need for it." I said, "Okay, tell me about your security backup plan." And he looked at me, said, "What happens when you get run over by a bus?" He said, "Well, I've given my mum the password," right? That was his whole defensive measure. And I try and be a realist, and I say to him, "I will tell you what happens in the real world. Somebody in Africa has got $100,000 or $1 million worth of Bitcoins, which somehow they decided to use your product because they thought this was the best product on the market, and you get run over by a bus. You think they're just going to accept going, oh, Johnny got run over by a bus, that's it, we lost $100,000. It doesn't quite work like that in the real world, And again, we come to that hope, and his thing was, well, hopefully I'll never get run over by a bus. So one, as an investor, hope is not something I can go to sleep at night going, well, I've got this great investment, and the entrepreneur hopes he doesn't get run over. So there is a lot of idealism, but hey, that's a good thing, because Daniel Ek, who's the founder of Spotify, he was an idealist. He was a 22-year-old kid when I met him, and I said, how are we going to fix this? And he's like, I'll find a way. But he'd done businesses before, whilst there was a certain amount of naivety and confidence, he understood the fundamentals of what the other party wanted. Living in denial and not understanding how the global ecosystem of business actually works is a dangerous thing to be involved in. And I hate to keep on going on about it, but I sat there and I was mesmerized by the presentation that Maria did, because she actually explains it in plain English, which is great, there's no friction, and merchants aren't being charged as much as the credit card companies are charging. You try and go and buy $10 worth of Bitcoins out there. I think it'll be easy if you get on a plane, go to Mount Gox and just camp outside and knock on the door going, here's my $10, can you give me some Bitcoins? Because they're not going to send them to you, right? So this is, you talk about frictionless, I think this is the highest form of friction that we're dealing with, right? Nobody talks about that because, you know what, it's not cool to talk about that.
I have definitely learned through experience that the hardest part about Bitcoin is getting them.
Yeah.
That's where all the friction is at the entry points. Once you have them, it's really easy to send. And, it's almost like if you were to build the financial system from scratch, it would look more like Bitcoin. But in fact, that's not the financial system we have inherited. And to get your Bitcoins, unless someone sends them to you for free, you've got to work with that financial system.
Well, if there was a new financial system built today, I'm guessing 50% of the liquidity wouldn't be controlled out of one building in Tokyo, would it? We live in a world, and I don't know how many people there are in Tokyo, but it definitely doesn't have 50% of the world's population. So you take all those factors in. But again, we're in an industry which is growing, so change is going to come. So we have to embrace change. What I always try and say, and we come back to the adult supervision, that it's all very well saying, we don't need regulation, and we probably don't need interference, but who is going to regulate all of this? Because we come back to the situation of there are investors who want to invest in solid business models. There are entrepreneurs who'd like to build great companies, but the fundamentals there aren't necessarily aligned, because the two people, the entrepreneurs go, well, I want to bring down the central bank. I mean, I've met entrepreneurs who's like, I want to bring down the central bank. Introduce me to some VCs. It's like, you do realize the people who you're talking about bringing down are the same people who you're expecting to fund you, because I don't know many Bitcoiners who are running multi-billion-dollar funds. So just this divide. So I think some sort of education and accepting this is the real world. This is not a fairy tale. You know, and I spend a lot of time in the normal web space, as call it. You know, it's always great to look at Kevin Systrom from Instagram. You know, hey, you know, it was a photo app and he sold it for $1 billion. I know about 4,000 other guys who created a photo app who've gone back to their 9-to-5 jobs because it didn't work. So, you know, just taking, well, you know, we can change the world. Great. And I hope it happens in some shape or form. But, you know, you have to look at the bigger picture that there's a lot more going on in the world than, hey, you know, we're going to go on Bitcoin Talk Forum and together we're going to bring down the global financial system.
Starting with the Fed, of course. I want to talk a little bit about compliance. Clearly, professionalism is important and understanding how business works is important. There is a debate in the startup world, even outside of Bitcoin. You see this when you read about Uber, the taxi app, Airbnb. Is it better to, when it comes to regulators, and particularly when you have a disruptive technology that does not perfectly map to the categories that everyone understands, is it better to ask permission or to beg forgiveness? And is the answer to that question different in money than it would be in other regulated industries?
It's an interesting question. You know, I lived in China for a few years, and there, asking permission for anything, you get given a no because it stems from the, you know, the communist mindset back in the day that the person who says yes is responsible, right? So you go and ask somebody, say, can I do this? And they say to you, yes, you can. They're the single point of responsibility. When anything else fails, somebody says, who authorized this? So it's far easier to say no. And then you've got, you know, asking for forgiveness. So you go back to, well, let's do this and we'll live in hope. And I think it depends in different sectors. The issue we've got right now, and especially in the Bitcoin space, and you know, whether people admit it or not, is nobody has a clue what's going on. Right? I mean, I would like to think CoinDesk, which is one of the bigger publications. Actually, I'm curious, who reads CoinDesk here? Right. A lot of people. Now, you'd think I'd be sitting up here going, I'm an expert, I know everything. And I'll use a swear word here. I'm clueless. I seriously am, right? As are most people in this room. However, we come back to, well, I read this article and I read that article, which makes me an expert. Nobody has any idea what's going on, and everyone collectively is living in a bit of hope, going, well, if we keep on all talking about it, hopefully somebody somewhere along the line is going to figure it out. Inside the banks, nobody actually knows whose division it is. You know, I'm sure it started off with the guy who was doing the Twitter account going, oh, there's this new startup thing called Bitcoin. Yeah. Can you deal with it? I had an email from somebody yesterday going, I have some friends that'd like to talk to the guy behind Bitcoin. Can you introduce him? Like, sorry, and these are, you know, serious people who don't actually know. So, what was the question again? I'm lost what the question was.
Is it better to ask permission or to beg forgiveness?
So who do you ask permission from? The Twitter or the social media guy? You know, you go up to him going, stop tweeting, can I run this exchange? Yeah? Where I'm not going to answer questions when people, and you know what, I may just pack up and go away for 2 weeks and put a sign up, no offense to Charlie Shrem, going, put a holding page up going, hey, we're redoing our platform, redoing our website, see ya, we're out of here, right? You know? Is he going to give you permission for that? So I don't even know who one's supposed to be going to ask for permission. So you end up going to the wrong people, right? So you end up going to the people that are like, oh, this seems money laundering. Let's send it straight over to the money laundering unit. And they're like, well, there is no money here. What have they laundered, right? So it's the whole thing. And then you've got lawyers talking about it. And I'll give you another prime example. I'm letting it all out today, by the way. I met a lawyer last week who's advising a startup who wants to raise money. And I said, what's your regulation situation? They're like, we have this amazing lawyer. He's a Bitcoin expert. I was like, can I meet him? So I meet him. And I'm like, we start talking. How many Bitcoins do you have? And he looks at me and he's like, none. And I'm like, how can you possibly advise? You're the single person in this meeting room who can send these guys to jail or keep them out of jail, and you've never bought a Bitcoin? But what I realized was all he does is read CoinDesk. And if I, as the publisher and
there you go.
CoinDesk, I'm sitting here going, I don't have a clue, but he's making a great business, and unfortunately that's where the naivety comes in. Peter and Lucy doing the startups outside, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Because he's got a title of X, Y, Z, he can now make a great business of advising them of stuff which I'm busy trying to outsource to freelance writers who I've never met, who are writing it, which they've seen on Bitcoin, Reddit's Bitcoin forum. That's the truth of what's going on in this industry. But you know what? We can gloss it up as much as we like. So.
Mm-hmm.
You did want a fireside chat, right?
Yes.
So here it is.
You're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly shows include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at SEANSOutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.
More like a bar side chat. Just to not to keep harping on this, but I mean, part of what I was thinking of when I asked that question is, I mentioned Uber. Uber gets a lot of customers, and then they deal with the taxi commission and the local taxi commission, and therefore it is a little bit trickier politically to. For the established interest to say,
it's
no, you
city
can't
by
do
city,
that.
right?
Yeah,
So
city by city.
I know that space very, very well. It's city by city, and whilst it is regulated from somewhere along the line in the government, it's not controlled centrally.
Yeah.
There isn't the World Bank, there isn't IMF, there isn't trillions and trillions of dollars at stake. And some they win and some they lose. They're having an issue in Denver at the moment. They had an issue with Sweden, and every country and every city has certain different restrictions. I'll give you an example. Stockholm said to them, we have no problem with you operating here as long as you put a meter of some kind which shows the user when they're in the car how much your bill has racked up. Uber decided that that's not something which they believed in, and they decided not to do it, right? So there are small problems. The financial services, we'll come back to. I don't even know who to talk to, right? Do I go talk to somebody in Wall Street? Do I talk to somebody in Switzerland? Nobody really knows who to talk to, and there's different conversations. And we ran a story about the HMRC, which is the UK's revenue governing body, and they gave a great statement going, we don't think you need to be licensed under X, Y, Z, blah. And it looked like a great thing, and it said underneath, by the way, this could change at any moment, which it becomes legal or illegal, and you have to make relevant changes. So you can go and build a whole business model, and one email that could come from them means you're illegal overnight. So I don't even know where or who to start with this at the moment. So.
Yeah. PayPal during their formative years, they had a lot of struggles with regulators, and there's a great story that I think it was Louisiana. They were told by the state regulator, you need a license, or you don't have the right licensing, you've got to shut down in Louisiana. But at that point, they had a lot of customers in Louisiana, and those Louisiana PayPal customers burned up the phone lines.
Yeah.
Is there a calculated risk to take of creating facts on the ground?
There is, but then you come back to how can an army of people who want to remain anonymous burn up the phone lines, right? What are we going to do? Set up anonymous email accounts? So this is the challenge, right? You want to remain, you don't want anyone to know what you're doing, but then, the invisible man doesn't exist. 5,000 people can't just turn up at the regulator's office going, we want to use Bitcoin but we don't want you to know we're using Bitcoin to prove it for us. So, not to make a joke of it, because it's a very serious matter, I think there are a lot of different parallels which can be taken in. But, we're headed in the right direction, right? I mean, events like this and the right people are starting to take notice of it. There just isn't any magic wand, right? If there was one single person in a organization who you could sit down and explain the logic to, that'd be great, but there just isn't. And then, there are certain other consumer issues that come at stake, and a prime example is recurring monthly billing, right? A lot of people come to me, and the first thing they come to me and say, hey, would you like to invest in our company? I'm thinking about it. And maybe you can help us get the Spotify account, because Spotify is going to do $1 billion, and they'd be great for recurring billing. And I'm like, they should take Bitcoin. I said, I get that, but if we come to this month, the average price or the normal price is $9.99 a month for premium service. If it's $9.99, what is it, 0.1 Bitcoin today, and it's fine, the price goes up and down. In 3 months' time, you may be paying $250 a month for Spotify. So, who's going to control this element there, right? And, the average consumer doesn't want to be playing the currency markets. The traders in Wall Street, they're quite comfortable because there's arbitrage opportunities, but the average consumer, it's unfair on them to put this burden of volatility. At one stage you're going, this is the future, this is safe, etc. And the next stage you're going, oh, by the way, your Spotify service this month costs $250.
I would think there would be a fairly easy solution to that. I mean, if you have a service like Coinbase, and you authorize Coinbase to deduct the equivalent of $9.99 from your Bitcoin account, or blockchain or whoever. I mean, the math can't be too complicated for an algorithm or whatever.
To you and I, but think about who we are dealing with here and how far this journey has to go till we get to that stage. I mean, we've already accepted trying to buy coins is, a bit of a headache. You tried using blockchain. I mean, most teams, most companies have a UI team, which is make this product work really well. And I know the guys at blockchain, I'm sure they have an anti-UI team. They're like, here's a great product, make it really, really hard to use. It took me many months to work out that's where my coins were, because it seemed like there was this data thing and some charts going on. So we are probably here, we need to get here, and there are random pockets of information that people are going to get involved, which hopefully will get it towards the end solution. And then, is it Bitcoin or is it another form of digital currency? I honestly don't know. I'm a believer in digital currency, or what I call money over IP, friction. I don't really care if it's pegged to the Bitcoin, because it's obviously a friction that people want solving, and Bitcoin is the best out there at the moment.
We've got about 10 more minutes, and Shaq's got to get on a plane. So I think it would be a good time to take questions from the audience.
Hi, I'm Carol Van Cleef with Patton Boggs, and I was glad to hear the reference you made to your lawyer, or the lawyer sitting at the table, using the pronoun he instead of she. I think it's a very serious issue that everyone in the room who's trying to make that decision of how they're going to move forward, whether to go ahead and ask for forgiveness later, that's fine in one kind of setting, but you have to realize there are multiple people at the table on this issue. And one of them is the Department of Justice. And things are fine as long as they're going well. But if something goes wrong, and it could be the slightest little thing that puts you on the radar of the Department of Justice, the first thing they're going to come after on is, are you registered appropriately with FinCEN, and have you appropriately addressed the money transmitter licensing issue? And all they need, some of you have heard me say before, is one state to put up a hand and say, you needed a license in this state. And that's the basis of a federal criminal action. It's going on real time right now. The Department of Justice is really taken off after third-party payment processors and is doing this right now. And we're seeing it with some of the, probably more innocent, as I would say, players in the marketplace. But for whatever reason, they end up on the radar screen. So if it happens, it's almost a game over type situation. There are steps you could take to make it show that you've been trying to make a good faith effort, like sending in letters to the states, maybe putting applications in and so on, if you've already begun the activity. But we're in, especially with Bitcoin, a very, very delicate situation right now. If you talk to some of the state regulators, the feedback from the state regulators is a great deal of law enforcement interest around the issue. So it's on the radar screen. So I know that it was a very entertaining presentation that you just made, but I have to come in with a little bit of a dose of reality here, because unfortunately I end up on the other side having to bail people out of these situations.
One, you were supposed to ask a question, but you made a statement, which is fine, because I made a statement.
Well, it's supposed to be a chat, I thought.
I also made a statement, and all we can do is give our opinions, right? So for me, do I feel comfortable investing in an industry where there are too many unknowns? Probably not. I am very, very aware, and that's probably why I am not investing, because there have been cases, and if you take the gambling industry, where the investors and board members are responsible, and sometimes you can look at it from a legal aspect that, hang on a minute, you're the board, you were the ones who were supposed to be supervising this, but until there is some clear clarification, so you take the FinCEN, you take the anti-money laundering rules, there is so much noise out there that for me as an investor, it's way too much to even process, to decide, and I am all for having lawyers, and because it's required in any shape or form. What I'm not for is people thinking just because they met a lawyer and he may have been doing real estate the week before, and it comes back to what I was saying, that if you haven't run businesses, you don't have domain expertise to go and do the right due diligence on the right lawyer to see, is this the person who's going to keep me out of jail or not? So I think fundamentally, I agree with everything you say.
Another question?
How do you think an entrepreneur like Mark Zuckerberg would respond to adult supervision?
That's a good question.
How do I think an entrepreneur like Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah.
So Mark Zuckerberg has a lot of adult supervision around him. If you look at his board, it consists of Mark Andreessen, who was the founder of Netscape. It consists of Reed Hastings, who is the founder of Netflix. It consists of Peter Thiel, who's the founder of PayPal. I would like to think those are three adults who have gone through disruptive industry changes over the last 10 years and fought a lot of battles. He surrounds himself with a lot of smart people.
So would you say that just surrounding yourself with the right people while retaining control of your board is a good move for
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Would you say that just surrounding yourself with smart people while retaining legal, board control is a good idea for an entrepreneur?
Facebook, and it's similar to what Mark said, the finance industry is slightly different. Mark Zuckerberg, didn't create a bank. He created a bank of information, which consists of every person in the world having an account, and he's got his own challenges ongoing, and the company, as do all large internet companies, but he didn't fundamentally try and disrupt the global financial system. So it probably needs disrupting in some shape or form. I think the parallels are slightly different, but if you were to go and ask Mark, say, hey, when you started, he would say, the most important thing I did was surround myself with people who'd run business. Let's not forget, Mark Zuckerberg was in a dorm in his college or university, and Sean Parker actually flew out there with the last bit of money he had, and Sean Parker had done Napster. I mean, it's a story I've lived, having been involved in Spotify. Sean Parker had done Napster. He'd been sued for billions and billions of dollars. So whilst he had gone through, and let's take Napster and Bitcoin in the same space, that he'd lived through the challenges but came out on the other side. And I guess his valuable lesson to Mark Zuckerberg was, let's not upset the people who can send us to jail or sue us for trillions of dollars. So adult supervision in any shape or form is very important.
And of course, don't forget Sheryl Sandberg, yes, as far as adult supervision goes.
Hi, Chuck. My name is Susan Hyun. My question for you, actually, I'll piggyback off of the other two questions that were previously presented.
Connie.
I'll piggyback off the two questions that were previously presented. So in relevant to government activity, how does Spotify as well as CoinDesk anticipate that for the future? And to also piggyback off of the social media question regarding Facebook, I agree with your statement that he has surrounded himself with some very intelligent individuals. How does Spotify and your take on CoinDesk as far as monetization in the music industry specifically? What is your thought process surrounding that as far as embedded content as well as protecting the right, protecting rights holders for artists?
Are we referring to the Spotify business model as such, or the link of that with digital currency and Bitcoin? I'm curious.
I'm tabling that question to you to answer both topics.
Okay, so one, I'm sitting here as a minor investor in Spotify, but our agreements are with the rights holders, right? So
yes.
We didn't do what a lot of people did in the music space, which is let's ask for permission or after we've launched, which is why it took Spotify many, many years to get the licenses required. And that was a 4-year struggle of going continuously knocking on the doors. And that conversation changed over the years, because what we were able to do was, starting in a small country like Sweden with 9 million people, which on the global level of music sales was probably country number 19, and then show how that worked in that country, and then go, well, now it's working in Norway, and now we've tried it here, and then for the US market, which is the world's largest music market, to go, well, okay, there is some traction, rather than for the rights holders to risk everything on one bet, which would be crazy for them. At the same time, whilst this was going on, and we still had this conversation up until last year, and even these days we have it, you'll have a conversation with the rights holder. It's like, I don't believe in this change, and I'm quite happy selling CDs, and I don't want my music on Spotify or any other digital service. And you go to him, you do realize there are millions of pirate copies of your file, of your music, audio file, on the web, which you have no control over. And a lot of them really don't have an answer for that. So I think there is a possible lack of education on both sides that, technology is trying to change, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take a certain amount of time before the digital revenue is equivalent to what the CD sales were. But at the same time, you still have what's going on, which is, whether it's pirated DVDs or pirated CDs, you still have websites out there who are giving away the content free of charge. So I think it's a much bigger play, and are the labels rights holders? Yes. Are they regulators? Probably no, but there are regulators involved. But if you're actually doing what you're supposed to do, there is very minimal regulation required. I think that's that. In terms of CoinDesk, it's a self-funded project by me. It's started off because I wanted information. I'm in absolutely no rush to monetize this. It was just really for me to learn about the space and be a better informed investor, and it's actually had the opposite effect, because I thought having all this proprietary knowledge about the space would allow me to make more investments. I haven't done a single investment since I launched CoinDesk, because there's an overflow of information and there's far too many opportunities, but the risk factor is too high for me and my appetite to invest in. I hope that answers your question in some shape.
That does, actually. Thank you. Actually, one more question for you. How is your current existing business models? How do you foresee that in competition relative to the spaces that you're doing business in, relative to festivals and ID&T merger, things that are within that space, again, back to the monetization issue?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part again?
So how are you looking at competitors, such as big mergers and acquisitions, especially in the music and monetization space, such as ID&T, who has now come to North America, and tabling that with large labels such as Columbia, Sony, and so on, to your existing business model?
You don't like this answer, but luckily I don't have to get involved in any of that stuff. It's
actually, I like that answer.
Yeah, I have no involvement in that. I mean, there are people far smarter than me involved in thinking about the bigger play. And hey, for me, it was one part of the journey. I have 15 investments. The one in the Bitcoin industry, right, which I actively made an investment, was the company called BitPay, and I believe Tony's over there somewhere. There he is. And for me, the investment in that was, one, in Tony and the team, two, in what they were doing. So my investment in BitPay, I don't look at it as a Bitcoin investment. I look at it as a technology investment, because digital currency is going to come. And I have enough gray hairs to know that I know how this one plays out, and the people who are providing the services on the side are the ones that I want to back, because it's somebody who I can help scale versus investing in something which is taking a far higher risk. As an example, an exchange. I looked at a number of exchanges, and I wasn't comfortable with that.
Thank you very much.
I think we are out of time.
Yep, exactly. I want to thank you, first of all, Mark, for doing a great job.
My pleasure.
Throughout the conference. And Shaq, thanks a lot. It was a last-minute addition, and it was just wonderful having you here. So let's give these guys both a big round of applause.
Thanks for listening to episode 35 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Content for today's show is provided by Stephanie Murphy, Mark Hochstein, Charlie Shrem, Alan Safahi, and Shaquille Khan. Music was provided by Jared Rubens, and also me, because now that's something I do. If you want to help out with music we play on LTB, get in touch. As always, comments about the production can go to adam@letstalkbitcoin.com. You can read our daily blog at letstalkbitcoin.com, and you can participate in our listener subreddit at letstalkbitcoin.com/talk. See you next time.